The Seattle Seahawks reached agreement with Mike Macdonald and now become the youngest head coach in the NFL.
The coach is special. He's special. I think this is an awesome fit.
I've seen so far, man, he's got a vision. He's got a plan. He already laid it out for us as a team.
How we doing, everybody?
I loved this hire for the Seahawks. He also brought so much creativity in terms of his use of formations, personnel groupings, motion. It was like watching a mad scientist at work.
The Seahawks are and will be a solid team this season. This team is going to surprise a lot of people this season. They are one of those teams that remain solid, but a few key players away from greatness. But don't get it twisted. They have guys who can ball and potentially break out this season to the point where they become those key guys. But before we get into the Seahawks and how good I believe they can be, don't forget to hit that sub button, leave a like on this video, and with that, let's get into this video. So I don't think we can begin a conversation about the Seahawks without talking about the departure of Pete Carroll, a guy who has given the city, the team, arguably its best 14 years that it has ever had. So this is the end of an era. So as much as I like Pete Carroll, I do understand why it was time to move on. Pete Carroll's main calling card in the NFL has been on the defensive side of the ball, and the growing trend in the NFL is to now hire younger coaches. And well, Pete Carroll ain't no spring chicken, so the Seahawks went out and found someone who is a lot younger, 37 years old to be exact. But that's not the only reason that they moved on from Pete Carroll, because that calling card that Pete Carroll has that I was talking about earlier has been ranked 30th in the NFL over the last 2 years, which is not going to cut it. So as bad as Pete Carroll wanted to stay, it was probably best that he goes. But that should not diminish the fact that he has had a great run, if not the greatest run in Seahawks history. And with all of that being said though, the Seahawks, unlike other teams who look to hire these great offensive minds, decided to hire a great defensive mind instead, similarly to the Texans with DeMeco Ryan. And so now we introduce you to Mike Macdonald, who was the defense coordinator for the Ravens last year, and with the Ravens he did a damn good job. In 2023, his defense became the first in NFL history to finish a season ranked #1 in each of the following categories: points allowed, which was 16.5, sacks, which was 60, takeaways, which was 31, tied with the New York Giants, something that I did not know. It was also ranked #1 in the NFL in both points differential, plus 203, and turnover margin, plus 12, tied with, once again, the New York Giants. This is head scratching to me, but led by 4 AP All-Pros. In safety, Kyle Hamilton; defensive tackle, Justin Madubuike; linebackers, Patrick Quinn and Raekwon Smith. The Ravens allowed the league's 6th fewest yards with 301.4 yards per game. Madubuike posted a team-high 13 sacks, most among NFL interior linemen, and safety Geno Smith ranked 2nd in the NFL with 7 interceptions. And now, with all that being said, even if you have a great defensive coach or coordinator, you have to have the personnel to perform what the coach is scheming to be done. And for the Seahawks, I think they have the right guy in Mike Macdonald as the head coach. But do they have the personnel, like that Ravens team, to pull off the scheme that Mike Macdonald wants to obviously run? Well, we could talk about this entire roster defensively, but I want to talk about 3 guys that I believe are key components of this defense, not only for this season, but following seasons to come. So with that, let's talk about safety Julian Love. Coming off of a Pro Bowl, he just signed a 3-year contract extension. He had 85 tackles last year with 4 interceptions. This may not mean much to you though, but he was ranked 95th by the players during the player vote for last year. He can flat out ball. Next is a 1st round pick from the 2023 draft, and that is Devin Witherspoon, a guy that should get better this up and coming season. Great speed, great eye for the ball, but he has something that I like that you simply can't teach, which is an extremely high motor. He won't cheat you or the game of football. And last but not least, a linebacker from the 2022 NFL draft, Boye Mafe, the man who led them in sacks last year with a total of 9, who I believe will have another jump in his game and production this year. This team has some young talent on it, and I believe they will show up and need to show up and produce this year if they want to take their defense to the next level. And I want to quickly highlight a guy that I'm high on, someone they drafted drafted in the first round this year, and that's Byron Murphy II, who compiled 79 tackles, 22 tackles for loss, 14 sacks, 14 pressures, 1 fumble recovery, and 1 forced fumble as a senior with Texas last year. And it's going to be very interesting to see how he develops on that defensive line. So with that being said, I want to switch gears to the offensive side of the ball because the objective of the game is to score points. Let's go ahead and talk about the new OC in town by the name of Ryan Grubb, who I'm personally high on. We will have to see if his style carries over from college, but with Washington, he was pretty good. Now, I know a lot of people would draw a clear connection to Kalen DeBoer and have questions as to what a Ryan Grubb's offense would look like, because Ryan Grubb has worked with Kalen DeBoer for 12 of the past 17 years, which would have been 13 if the Seahawks had not called and took him away from Alabama. But ultimately, I believe this offense will look somewhat like what you saw in Washington. And although Penix had great passing stats, Washington did run the ball very well with running back Dylan Johnson. So they were going to see some mixture of high tempo with the emphasis on having a spread out offense. So I think y'all have a good one with OC Ryan Grubb, a guy who can grow alongside a defensive head coach in Mike Macdonald in Seattle and become a very good tandem. Now, moving on to the most important piece of the offensive side of the ball, which is QB. And what's that old cliche? Everyone is a quarterback away. So sure, we could take that route, but how do you take a guy like Geno Smith, who is obviously going to be the starter, a guy who isn't really mentioned in the great category when it comes to QBs, but is a guy who could win enough games for you in order to propel you into the playoffs? He kind of reminds me of a more risk-taking Alex Smith. Oddly enough, Smith, a guy who isn't great but good enough to win some regular season games for you. A guy like that, you obviously have to give him a great defense. And that's why you hire a guy like Mike Macdonald. The Seahawks were not in position to go up and grab a young QB, and probably did not have a young QB who they just fell in love with. So it makes more sense to do what they can to make sure that Geno Smith succeeds, because he can put up numbers and is a good player. Last year, he had 3,624 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions in 15 games. I think Geno Smith is solid, and with a better defense, he will look even better, because you know, if a defense can get stops, you can take less risks and not press as much at the quarterback position. And I think Geno Smith is underrated in this realm of QBs. He's not great, like I have stated before, but he can get things done if provided with the opportunity. So it's odd to me that a lot of people really wanted to say that at some point in time, Sam Howell will start over him during the middle of the season. I did see that early on, but a lot of that has died down within these few weeks. Reports have come out that Sam Howell is alarmingly inaccurate so far in the Seahawks training camp. And so with that kind of made me want to make this video. And then I want to give a shout out to this commenter right here who also wanted me to make a video about the Seahawks. So at that point, I just knew I had to come out with this video. And I want to say, I think most people knew that Geno Smith would be the starter. Sam Howell is basically here just in case Geno goes down or just struggles extremely bad. And to give an update on Sam Howell just quickly, next day at camp, another insider put out a tweet saying that Geno Smith remains on fire. He hit Jackson Smith for a number of big plays. Sam Howell, after some pronounced struggles early in camp, was better today than he has been. So Sam Howell is a young QB who definitely needs more time to develop his game. Geno was always going to be the starter at the beginning of the season and probably for the remainder of the season. But there are plenty of people who are not high on Geno Smith and are ready for a new regime in Seattle. And I think the Seahawks are in the perfect position to either keep Geno going forward, depending on how he plays this year, or draft a young and up-and-coming quarterback in the draft. QBs like Quinn Ewers, Jalen Miro, Carson Beck, Shedeur Sanders, because of two things. One, they are a relatively young team, and for two, if they decide to move on from Geno Smith, they have the offensive weapons in order to help develop a young quarterback, which is very important. I don't think a lot of people talk about this. So let's look at who they have. DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Last year, DK had 1,000 yards receiving. Jackson Smith only had 628 yards receiving, but I believe he will take his game to another level this year. Tyler Lockett is still there, and he added 894 yards receiving last year, along with tight end Noah Fant, who added 414 yards last year. The Seahawks low-key got guys everywhere, and I'm not sure how Ryan Grubb will do in terms of the running game this year, but Seattle has two capable running backs in Kenny Walker III and Zach Charbonnet, who shared running duties last year, with Walker being the main back back. And the more that I think about this team, the more I feel like they are one of the more underrated groups in the entire NFL. But it's going to come down to how fast can the new head coach Mike Macdonald can improve this defense, and can the young guys on the team take that next step. But there is even one question mark that I forgot to mention earlier that I really think needs to be addressed, and that is the offensive line. Last year they ranked 31st by Pro Football Focus, and this year early predictions are showing that they may be still at the bottom half of the league. Sharp Football Analysis has them ranked 29th in their early predictions. The Seahawks just signed Connor Williams to a 1-year $6 million deal, so maybe he can help them out. So whenever you are watching the Seattle Seahawks offense, it's going to be very important to look and see how well that offensive line can protect Geno Smith. Will the offensive scheme that the Seahawks draw up even have time to develop? If so, I think this team can win plenty of games. The NFC West is strong. You have the Cardinals, the Rams, and the 49ers in there, and it's going to be very interesting watching them going forward. But with all of that being said, if you made it this far in the video,